The storm had passed, leaving the world eerily quiet. The air smelled of salt and sorrow. Broken shells dotted the shore, and the sea.com once more glittered innocently. As if it had never risen in wrath the night before, Eldrick sat upon the sand, soaked to the bone, his heart heavier than the ocean itself. He stared at the horizon, waiting for a sign, any sign that his wife still lived. But the sea gave none. The castle, the crown, the gold, all had been swallowed whole. He turned and saw it, the old hut they once called home, standing crooked but intact upon the cliffside. Its wooden planks were the same faded gray, the roof sagging slightly with age. It was as though time had turned back, erasing every trace of their rise and fall. Slowly, painfully, he climbed the hill toward it. Inside, the familiar smell of brine and smoke greeted him. The small bed, the table with 2 chairs, the cracked clay pot, everything was as it had been before their first wish. But the silence made it feel emptier than ever. Eldrick sank into the chair and buried his face in his hands. If only she had stopped, he whispered. If only I had refused. The sea breeze drifted through the window, carrying a faint sound, almost like a voice, faint and far away. He lifted his head. It was impossible, and yet, he stumbled outside, running to the edge of the cliff. The morning sun shimmered upon the waves, and there, near the shore, something moved, a figure. He rushed down the rocks, heart pounding. The closer he got, the clearer she became. Mara, lying on the sand, her once golden gown now torn and dull. Her crown was gone, her hands empty. She looked small, fragile, like the woman he had once loved before greed took hold. He knelt beside her. Mara, he cried, lifting her gently. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. They were no longer sharp with ambition, only tired, frightened, and full of shame. She whispered weakly, What happened? He looked out at the calm sea, his voice trembling. The sea took back what it gave. We have nothing now, nothing but each other. Tears welled in her eyes. The palace, the crown, gone, he said softly, all gone. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the waves answered, lapping gently against the shore as if soothing them both. Then Mara turned to him, her voice barely more than a breath. I wanted so much, Eldrick. I thought each wish would fill the emptiness inside me. But the more I had, the emptier I felt. He brushed the hair from her face, his voice tender. You forgot what mattered, but you're still here. That's what counts. Her tears mixed with the salt of the sea. I was blind, she whispered. Blind to the truth that happiness isn't something you take, it's something you find in what you already have. Eldrick nodded, his heart aching with both sorrow and relief. Then, let us begin again, he said quietly. No wishes, no greed, just life, simple and honest. In the days that followed, the couple rebuilt what little they had. Eldrick returned to his fishing, casting his net into the calm waters each morning, grateful for whatever the sea chose to offer. Sometimes, when the light struck the waves just right, he thought he saw a flicker of gold beneath the surface, a brief shimmer, like a watchful eye. Mara tended the small garden behind their hut, growing vegetables and herbs. Her hands, once adorned with jewels, were now rough from work, but there was peace in her labor. Each evening, she would cook what Eldrick brought home, and together they would share their humble meal beneath the stars. One twilight, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mara looked out toward the sea and whispered, I wish for nothing more. Eldrick smiled gently beside her. That is the only wish worth making. And as the waves whispered softly along the shore, it was as though the golden fish itself approved the faintest ripple of gold, shimmered across the water before fading into the deep dot in time. The villagers would tell the story of the fisherman and his wife, how greed nearly destroyed them, and how they found redemption not in riches, but in humility. Children would learn that the sea grants wishes only to test the heart, and that those who seek too much lose everything they love. Eldrick and Mara lived quietly for many years thereafter. Their love, once burdened by ambition, grew stronger in simplicity. The hut by the sea became a symbol not of poverty, but of peace, the kind that gold could never buy. And though no one ever saw the golden fish again, the sea remained calm around their home, as if it, too, had found rest. Years drifted by like waves upon the shore. Eldrick and Mara grew older, their hair silvering like the foam on the tide. Their lives, once consumed by desire, had become peaceful and rhythmic, the quiet kind of joy that only those who have suffered understand. Each morning, Eldrick rose before dawn and walked to the edge of the sea, casting his nets into the shimmering blue. Sometimes he caught plenty, sometimes only a few fish, but never again did he complain. The sea had become a friend to him, unpredictable, powerful, yet forgiving. Mara would watch from the window, her heart calm. Gone were the jewels, the gowns, the golden halls. She now wore simple linen and carried in her eyes a gentleness that had not been there before. The woman who had once demanded the world was now content with the warmth of a shared meal and the soft lullaby of waves outside their door. Yet deep within her heart, Mara never forgot the lessons the sea had taught. Sometimes, when the wind whispered through the reeds, she thought she could still hear the voice of the golden fish, wise, kind, and sorrowful. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, the couple sat together on the sand. watching the last light dance across the waves. The sky glowed in hues of gold and rose, and the sea mirrored every color as if it were painting their memories one final time. Mara sighed softly. "Eldrick," she said, her voice fragile but peaceful, "do you think the golden fish still remembers us?" He smiled faintly. "I think the sea remembers everything," he replied, "but it holds no grudges. It only teaches." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "It taught me more than any crown ever could." For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the song of the sea. Then Mara said, "Do you regret it? The wishes we made?" Eldrick thought for a long moment before answering. "No," he said slowly. "If we hadn't wished, we might never have learned how much we already had. The sea gave us everything and then took it away to show us the truth." That night, the waves lapped gently against the shore, and the moon cast a silver path across the water. Mara stood at the edge of the surf, her reflection trembling upon the surface. She whispered into the night, "Golden fish, if you can hear me, I have no wish to make, only gratitude." For a moment, the sea remained still. Then, just as she turned to leave, a faint shimmer appeared beneath the water, a soft glow, golden and alive. Eldrick joined her, his breath catching as the light grew brighter. From the depths, the golden fish emerged one last time, its scales glinting like stars. "Fisherman, wife," it spoke, its voice gentle and full of calm. "Your hearts have learned what your wishes could not. You have found peace where others would still seek power. The sea remembers your journey and forgives." Mara's eyes filled with tears. "We wronged you," she said softly. "I was blind with greed, and yet you still show kindness." The fish's eyes glowed warmly. "Greed drowns those who cling to it," it said, "but humility brings them back to shore." Eldrick bowed his head. "We thank you. We ask for nothing, only to live in harmony with the sea." The fish circled once, sending ripples of gold through the water. "Then your wish, your final, selfless wish, is granted. May your hearts remain as calm as these waters, and your days as full as the tide." With that, it dove beneath the waves, leaving behind a trail of light that faded slowly into the deep. The sea shimmered for a moment longer, then stilled once more. Mara leaned against Eldrick, her heart full. "Did you see that?" she whispered. He smiled. "A gift, not of gold, but of peace." From that night on, the sea remained calm near their home. Fishermen from neighboring villages often said the waters there were different, softer, kinder. Some swore they saw flashes of gold beneath the waves, guiding their boats safely back to shore. When Eldrick and Mara's time on Earth finally came to an end, the villagers built a small marker near their hut. Upon it, they carved the words, "The fisherman and his wife, who learned that peace is the greatest treasure." And so, their story lived on, told from mouth to mouth across generations. Parents told their children about the couple who had everything and lost it all, only to find something far more precious: wisdom, humility, and love. The sea, eternal and vast, kept its secret. Yet every now and then, when the sunlight touched the waves just right, a faint golden ripple would appear, a reminder that the sea remembers, forgives, and teaches still. Moral of the story: true happiness does not come from endless wishing, but from contentment with what one already has. Greed may build castles, but gratitude builds peace. The days that followed were golden but uneasy. Grants gifts only to those who learn when to stop asking. Eldrick felt the light grow dimmer within its walls. Everywhere he walked, there were signs of plenty: fruit overflowing from bowls, gold lining every edge of the windows, servants hurrying through echoing halls, yet the air carried something cold and empty. Mara, once a woman who had scrubbed floors and mended nets, now sat upon a velvet chair and gave commands with a wave of her jeweled hand. But her joy, like foam on the sea, dissolved quickly. Eldrick noticed it first in her eyes. When she gazed upon the horizon, her expression wasn't peace, it was hunger. One evening, as they dined beneath a canopy of silken drapes, Mara looked up from her plate and said, "Eldrick, have you ever thought how small we still are?" He blinked, confused. "Small? We live in a palace, Mara. We have all that anyone could dream of." She leaned back in her chair, her golden earrings swaying. "Yes, a palace built by a fish's favor. But we are not known. We have no power, no subjects, no crown. What use is gold if no one bows before us?" Eldrick felt a chill creep through his chest. "Mara, please. The sea has already given us more than we deserve. To demand a crown is to mock the heavens." But she laughed, a sharp, ringing sound that echoed through the marble hall. "Mock the heavens? No, my love. I simply wish to rise. The fish obeys. It has not denied us once." Eldrick's hands clenched at his sides. He could not stop her now. The woman he had once known, kind, clever, full of laughter, was buried beneath silks and pride. He saw in her eyes the same restless glimmer as the waves before a storm. That night, when she lay awake, gazing at the moonlight through the golden curtains, she said softly, "Tomorrow, you will go to the sea again, Eldrick. Tell the fish I wish to be queen." He turned toward her, his heart aching. "If I go again, Mara, the sea will turn against us. I can feel it." But she only smiled, her voice as smooth as silk. "Then let the sea obey its queen." The next morning, the sky was darker than before, not gray, but heavy with a strange greenish hue, as though the ocean's anger had bled into the clouds. Eldrick trudged down the path toward the shore, each step slower than the last. The sand was cold beneath his feet, and the waves hissed like whispers of warning. He stood at the edge of the water and called out, his voice barely carrying over the wind. Golden fish, if you can hear me, come once more. My wife, she now wishes to be queen. For a long while, the sea remained still. Then, without warning, a wave crashed so violently that it nearly knocked him to the ground. From the foaming water, the golden fish emerged, but its scales no longer glowed bright gold. They were tarnished, dull, like metal that had lost its shine. The fish's voice was soft but sorrowful. Fisherman, your wife's heart has grown darker with each wish. Does she not know that power is the most dangerous desire of all? Eldrick bowed his head, his voice trembling. I have tried to stop her, but she does not listen. I beg you, grant her this last wish, if it will bring her peace. The fish's eyes flickered like fading stars. Peace cannot live beside greed, it said. But go home, fisherman. Your wife is already queen. And with that, it vanished beneath the waves. Leaving the sea swirling in black and gray, Eldrick turned and climbed the path home, the wind howling in his ears. But when he reached the top of the hill, he stopped in disbelief. The palace was gone. In its place stood a castle, vast, towering, its walls stretching into the mist. Soldiers stood in gleaming armor, and banners fluttered from high turrets. The courtyard was filled with carriages, servants, and nobles bowing as Mara stepped out onto a marble balcony. She was no longer the woman he knew. She wore a golden crown and robes lined with jewels. Her eyes were cold and regal. When she saw him, she smiled, not with warmth, but with triumph. Ah, my fisherman, she said. You see, the sea knows its ruler. Eldrick fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the sight. Mara, he whispered, when will this be enough? Her crown glinted in the fading light. Enough, she said softly, when even the sea itself bows before me. Eldrick's heart sank like an anchor into the depths. The wind rose around them, howling through the towers as if warning of what was to come. He looked toward the restless horizon, and for the first time, he feared the sea, not for its power, but for what it might take back. The kingdom by the shore was magnificent, towering walls, golden gates, and gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. Yet even with all her wealth and the crown upon her head, Queen Mara was not satisfied. Power, like salt water, had made her thirstier than ever. Each day she would stand upon the castle balcony, staring at the endless waves below. Her people bowed to her, her servants obeyed her every command, and still her gaze was fixed upon the sea, that vast, shifting realm that did not bow to anyone. Eldrick watched her in silence. The woman who once smiled at the sunrise now looked upon it with contempt, as though it burned too brightly without her permission. He had hoped that queenship would quiet her hunger, that this would finally be enough. But he knew now that greed was like the tide, it always returned, stronger than before. One evening, as storm clouds gathered over the horizon, Mara spoke, her voice calm but dangerous. Eldrick, she said, I have been thinking. He turned to her cautiously. That never bodes well. She ignored his weary tone. The sea, she said, gesturing toward the crashing waves below, bows to no one, not to kings, not to queens. And yet, it was from the sea that our fortune came. Tell me, why should I not rule it too? Eldrick froze. Rule the sea, he repeated, horrified. Mara, no human can command the ocean. It is a living power, older and wiser than us all. Even the golden fish serves its will. She smiled faintly, the wind whipping her hair across her face. Then I will make the fish serve mine. Eldrick felt the blood drain from his face. You would enslave the very creature that helped us. The one that showed mercy. Mercy is for the weak, Mara said coldly. Power is for those who dare to take it. Tomorrow, you will go to the sea again and tell the fish that I wish to rule it, to be its queen as well as this land's. Eldrick's voice broke. If I do this, Mara, there will be no peace left for us. The sea will turn against you. Then let it try, she said, her eyes flashing like lightning. I am no longer a fisherman's wife. I am a queen, soon to be more. The next morning was darker than any before. The sky churned with thick gray clouds, and thunder muttered across the horizon. The sea heaved in great restless waves. Crashing against the rocks like a beast in chains, Eldrick walked to the shore, his heart heavy with dread. He could hardly keep his footing against the wind. The sand was cold. The air smelled of iron and rain. When he reached the edge of the surf, he called out, shouting against the roar of the storm, golden fish, if you can hear me, come once more. My wife, she now wishes to rule the sea itself. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Then the water split open with a terrible force, sending waves higher than the cliffs. The golden fish rose from the depths, but this time, its glow was faint and flickering. Its voice no longer gentle. Fisherman, it said, its tone filled with sorrow and thunder. You should not have come. Eldrick fell to his knees, rain pelting his face. I begged her to stop, but she would not listen. She demands dominion over the sea. The fish's eyes glowed faintly, like dying embers. Your wife's heart has drowned in her own desire. What she asks for cannot be given, only taken. and what is taken from the sea will always be reclaimed. A great gust of wind roared across the water, and lightning cracked open the sky. The waves turned black as ink. The fish's voice grew louder, echoing through the storm. Go home, fisherman. Your wish is granted, but beware, for the sea takes back all that it lends. And with that, it vanished beneath the crashing waves, leaving only silence, the kind that comes before disaster. Eldrick staggered home through the storm. The rain stung his face, and the wind howled like a chorus of ghosts. When he reached the hilltop, he froze. The grand castle, the symbol of all their greed, was changing before his eyes. The walls trembled, the gold melted away like wax, and the banners were ripped to shreds by the raging wind. Lightning struck the highest tower, splitting it in two. Eldrick ran forward, shouting Mara's name, but his voice was lost in the thunder. High upon the balcony, Queen Mara stood, defiant against the storm, her crown flashing with every bolt of lightning. I am the queen of the sea, she screamed into the wind. Do you hear me, ocean? You are mine. But the sea answered, not with words, only with fury. A wave taller than the palace rose from the depths, black and merciless, and in one thunderous crash, it swept the castle away. The storm raged through the night, swallowing everything: the palace, the gardens, the gold, until nothing remained but silence and foam. When dawn came, Eldrick awoke on the sand beside the broken pieces of his old boat. The sea was calm again, the sky clear and pale. He looked around. The castle was gone. There was no sign of Mara, no crown, no marble, no gold. Only their old hut stood in its place, weathered and small, as it had been before the first wish, and from the sea came a single soft whisper. The morning after the wish was granted, as it was. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, not the ragged holes of their old hut. Eldrick woke to the sound of gulls outside and the soft crackle of fire in a real hearth. For a moment, he didn't recognize where he was. He touched the smooth wooden walls, the polished floor, the sturdy door that didn't creak in the wind. It felt like a dream he might lose if he blinked too long. Mara was already awake, her laughter echoing through the small cottage. She was twirling around the room, her bare feet brushing the woven rug. Eldrick, look at this. A cupboard, an actual cupboard, and plates that match, she exclaimed, as though every corner of the house held a miracle. Eldrick smiled at her joy. He had not seen her this happy in years. It seems the golden fish keeps its promises, he said quietly. She turned to him, eyes shining. Oh, Eldrick, we're finally free from that miserable hut. We can live like real people now, not like beggars by the sea. He chuckled softly. We were never beggars, Mara. The sea always provided enough. Mara waved a hand dismissively. Enough is not the same as good, my dear husband. Don't you see? This is what we deserve, after all those years of struggle. Eldrick didn't argue. He looked around at the cottage, the neatly made bed, the shelves stocked with bread and dried fruit, the chairs carved from fine wood. It was indeed more than they'd ever had. Still, something about it made him uneasy. Perhaps it was too perfect, too quiet. The sea outside seemed distant now, almost sulking in silence. After breakfast, Eldrick went down to the shore, as he always did. The waves lapped gently against the sand, but there was a different sound in them, a slow, heavy rhythm, as though the sea was thinking. He stood there for a long time, watching the sunlight dance on the water. Golden fish, he whispered, though he didn't expect an answer. Thank you. The sea remained still. Days turned into weeks, and life in the new home settled into a peaceful routine. Eldrick fished less now, for they had more than enough food and supplies. He spent his days mending nets, tending the small garden behind the house, and watching the waves. Mara, however, grew restless again. At first, she delighted in keeping the cottage spotless, baking bread and decorating the shelves with shells and flowers. But soon, she began comparing. Our cottage is beautiful, she said one evening, but when I went to the market today, I saw the merchant's house. It has 2 floors, and his wife wears silk. Eldrick frowned. Mara, we have what we need. The sea has already been generous. She sighed dramatically. Yes, but why stop now? The fish said it could grant wishes. What harm could there be in asking for just one more? Eldrick's stomach tightened. Mara, you mustn't think that way. Each wish has its price, even if we cannot see it. She laughed lightly, dismissing his concern. Oh, Eldrick, you worry too much. You let fear keep you small. The sea is vast, full of gifts, waiting to be claimed. You're just too humble to reach for them. He said nothing more, but that night he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, listening to the wind whistling through the eaves and the distant crash of waves. The sea no longer sounded peaceful, it sounded alive, watching, waiting. The next morning, Mara appeared unusually quiet. She stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Eldrick, she said finally, go back to the fish. Tell it we wish for something grander, a palace perhaps. He turned to her, shocked. A palace. Mara, that is too much. We cannot ask for more when we already have enough. Her voice hardened. Enough for you, perhaps, but I have lived my whole life in rags, dreaming of something better. I will not stop now when greatness is within reach. Eldrick felt his heart sink. He remembered the kindness in the fish's eyes and the uneasy pull of the tide when he had last spoken to it. Mara, he said gently, Some treasures are meant to stay beneath the waves. But Mara only crossed her arms, her jaw set with stubborn determination. Eldrick stepped outside, feeling the wind shift, colder, stronger. The waves were rising higher against the rocks. He could almost hear the sea whisper his name, as though warning him that the tide of wishes was beginning to turn. Inside, Mara's voice carried through the cottage. Don't come back until the fish has granted our new wish. Eldrick closed his eyes. He knew that peace, like the sea, could vanish with one greedy tide. With a heavy heart, he walked back to his small boat, unaware that the gentle miracle they had received was about to awaken something far more dangerous, the storm of endless desire. The sky was heavy with clouds that morning when Eldrick returned to the sea. The air smelled of salt and coming rain, and the waves rolled with a deep, uneasy rhythm. He could feel the sea's mood shifting, as though it already knew what he had come to ask for. He stood at the water's edge, his boots sinking into the wet sand. The first wish had brought him peace, but this one, he feared, would not. Still, his wife's words echoed in his mind. Don't come back until the fish has granted our new wish. Eldrick sighed and called out softly, his voice trembling against the wind. Golden fish, if you can hear me, come once more. My wife has another wish she asks of you. For a long moment, nothing stirred. Then the sea darkened. The calm blue turned to iron gray, and bubbles rose from the depths. The golden fish appeared at last, its glow dimmer than before, its eyes less bright, as though it had aged since their last meeting. Fisherman, it said quietly, why do you call me again? Did I not grant your first wish? Are you not content? Eldrick lowered his head. I am content, he said truthfully. But my wife, she is not. She asks now for something grander, a palace to live in. The golden fish was silent for a long while. The waves behind it began to churn, restless and gray. A palace, it repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Very well, fisherman, go home. Your wish is granted. Before Eldrick could speak another word, the fish vanished beneath the surface. The sea grew darker still, and a faint rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. Eldrick turned back toward the shore, his heart heavy. Each time he called upon the fish, the sea seemed to grow colder, less forgiving. He rowed quickly, the waves slapping against the boat's sides, and when he reached land, even the sand beneath his feet felt different, firmer, darker, alive. He climbed the hill toward where the cottage had stood, and froze. A small white house was gone. In its place stood a towering palace, its spires glittering in the dim light, its gates adorned with gold and silver. Flags fluttered in the salty wind, and guards in fine armor stood at the entrance. Beyond them stretched a garden larger than any he'd ever imagined, filled with roses and marble fountains. Mara stood at the top of the marble steps, dressed in a gown of silk the color of the sea at sunset. Her hair sparkled with jewels, and around her neck hung a chain of pearls that shimmered like moonlight. She looked down at Eldrick with delight, and something else in her eyes, something sharp and proud. She called, her voice echoing across the courtyard. Look at what the fish has given us. Isn't it magnificent? He gazed up at her, hardly able to speak. It is more than I ever imagined, he said. But Mara, do you not see? The sea grows darker each time. I fear it does not grant such things freely. She laughed lightly, the sound sweet but hollow. Nonsense, my love. The fish is our friend. The sea is generous. We have suffered enough. Now it is our turn to live as we deserve. Servants appeared then, bowing to her and offering trays of fruit and wine. She swept past Eldrick, already giving orders, already acting as though she had been born to rule the place. Eldrick followed her through the palace halls, his footsteps echoing against marble floors. The walls were hung with tapestries, the chandeliers glittered with crystal. Every luxury was there, but to Eldrick, the air felt heavy, the beauty hollow. That night, as Mara dined with her new servants, Eldrick stepped outside to look at the sea. From the palace balcony, he could see the waves far below. They no longer glowed under the moonlight. They were black, restless, murmuring like voices in the dark. He whispered into the wind, Golden fish, forgive us. My wife's heart cannot rest. I fear her wishes will drown us both. But the sea gave no answer, only the crash of waves and the hiss of foam against the rocks. Days turned into weeks again, and once more, Mara's joy began to fade. The palace, for all its beauty, did not fill the emptiness in her heart. She walked its long halls and saw only what she did not have: power, command, adoration. One evening, as the sun sank behind the horizon, she turned to Eldrick and said, Husband, this palace is splendid, but I was meant for more. Why should I not be queen? Eldrick's blood ran cold. Mara, he whispered, you would defy the order of the world itself. But she only smiled, that same bright, dangerous smile that the sea itself might wear before a storm. And in that moment, Eldrick knew that the sea had always been his companion, reached its highest wave. Furious when it did, it would surely break. Alive, always whispering stories that only a fisherman could understand. Every morning, before the sun even peaked above the horizon, the fisherman would wake to the soft rhythm of the waves crashing against the rocks. He lived in a tiny hut near the edge of the shore, built from driftwood and patched sails. It wasn't much, but to him, it was home, a place filled with salt, sand, and the scent of the ocean. The fisherman's name was Eldrick, though few remembered it. Most just called him the old man by the sea. His wife, Mara, was clever and strong-willed, but her heart was restless. She often stood by the window, gazing at the distant horizon as if waiting for something greater to arrive, a ship carrying gold, or perhaps fate itself. Their life was hard but steady. Each morning, Eldrick would push his small wooden boat into the water, his hands rough from years of labor. He cast his nets with quiet faith, never knowing what the sea might offer. Some days it was generous, a catch big enough to sell at the village market. Other days, the nets came up empty, heavy only with seaweed and disappointment. Yet, he never cursed the ocean. To him, it was a living spirit, unpredictable, but fair in its own way. Mara, however, did not share his contentment. She wanted more than fish and salt and the same gray skies. Eldrick, she would often sigh. Why must we live like this? Other men in the village have fine homes, golden coins, and warm clothes. Why can't we? Her husband would only smile softly, stirring the stew made from the day's catch. Because the sea gives what it chooses, my love. We must be grateful for that. But gratitude was not enough for Mara. Her dreams reached far beyond their hut. She imagined silken dresses, a kitchen filled with shining pots, and servants to sweep the sand from her doorstep. She didn't see beauty in simplicity. She saw failure in it. To her, the sea was not a companion, it was a thief that stole their chances of a better life. Still, despite her sharp words, there was love between them. Eldrick's patience often softened her anger, and sometimes, when the sunset painted the water gold, Mara would rest her head on his shoulder and whisper, "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps this is enough." But those moments were fleeting. The hunger for more always returned. One gray morning, the wind blew stronger than usual. Clouds hung low, heavy with rain. Eldrick knew it would be a difficult day, but his nets were empty and they had little food left. So, he pushed his small boat into the restless waves. The sea hissed against the sides of the vessel, warning him, but he rowed on. Hours passed. His arms ached from casting and pulling the nets, yet not a single fish appeared. Just as he thought to return home, something tugged sharply beneath the surface. Not the pull of a crab or the twist of seaweed, but a powerful, shimmering struggle. Eldrick held tight and began to draw the net in, heart pounding. Whatever it was, it shone beneath the water like a lantern in the dark. When he finally hauled it aboard, his breath caught in wonder. Inside the net flapped a golden fish, glowing as though it had swallowed a piece of the sun. Its scales glittered in shades of amber and light, casting ripples of gold across the fisherman's weathered face. But before he could even speak, the fish looked at him with wide, human-like eyes and said, in a voice soft as the tide, "Good man, please let me go. I am no ordinary fish. Spare my life, and I will grant you a wish." Eldrick's hands trembled, but not with greed, with awe. Never had he seen such a creature. He thought of Mara's longing, of their broken roof and empty shelves. Yet something inside him resisted the temptation. He felt the old rhythm of the sea in his heart, give and take, live and let live. He smiled kindly and said, "I wish nothing. Go free, golden one. The sea has given you life, and I will not take it." The fish blinked, its eyes shining like stars. "Your kindness will not be forgotten," it whispered before vanishing beneath the waves in a swirl of gold. As Eldrick rowed home, the sea shimmered strangely calm, as though pleased. He did not know then that this single act of mercy would awaken the tides of fate, and that his wife's restless heart would soon turn one golden wish into a storm that could drown them both. When Eldrick returned home that evening, the air smelled of rain and the wind carried the chill of the sea. His boat scraped against the sand as he dragged it ashore, the waves lapping softly at his boots. He felt lighter somehow, not because of what he carried, but because of what he had released. The image of the golden fish still shimmered in his mind, its voice echoing like a song beneath the waves. He entered the small hut, brushing the damp from his sleeves. Mara was kneeling beside the fire, stirring a pot of thin soup. She turned sharply when she saw his empty hands. "No fish, again," she said, her voice tight with frustration. Eldrick smiled faintly and sat beside her. "No fish," he said, "but I caught something unusual." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Unusual? Don't tell me the sea gave you a seashell and you're calling it treasure." He chuckled softly. "Not a seashell. A fish, a golden one. It spoke to me, Mara. It pleaded for its life and offered to grant me a wish in return. Her spoon froze mid. A talking fish, and you let it go." Eldrick nodded, still calm. "Yes, it was no ordinary creature. I felt it would be wrong to demand anything from it. I set it free." For a moment, silence filled the room. Only the fire crackled between them. Then Mara slammed the spoon against the pot, splashing soup onto the floor. "You what?" she cried. "You let a magical fish, one that could grant a wish, swim away." Eldrick frowned, startled by her anger. "Mara, it was a living being. It asked for mercy. I could not, you could not," she snapped. "You could not think of our broken roof, our empty cupboards, our rags for clothes. You could not think of me, Eldrick." Her words struck deep. Eldrick bowed his head, guilt washing over him like cold rain. He had never wanted to make her unhappy. He had only followed his heart, the same heart that guided him on the sea. Mara's voice softened, but her eyes still burned with urgency. Go back to the fish. Tell it you've changed your mind. Ask for something simple, a new home, perhaps. Surely it would understand. Eldrick hesitated. I cannot be sure it will come again. Then try, she insisted. You are a good man, Eldrick, but goodness doesn't feed us. The sea gave you a chance, and you let it slip away. Please, go back. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Behind her sharp tone was not cruelty, but desperation. She was tired of struggling, tired of patching holes and counting coins. He sighed deeply, knowing she would not rest until he tried. The next morning, Eldrick returned to the shore. The sky was pale gray, and the water was smooth as glass. He stepped into his small boat and pushed off, the oars creaking in rhythm. When he reached the deep waters, he called softly, golden fish, if you can hear me, come once more. My wife wishes to speak through me. At first, there was nothing. Then, the sea rippled gently at first, then in growing circles. The golden fish rose from the depths, glowing faintly beneath the surface. Its scales gleamed in the dim light, and when it spoke, its voice carried the calm of the ocean itself. Fisherman, it said, I remember your kindness. Why have you returned? Eldrick bowed his head respectfully. My wife, she is not content with our old hut. She asks for a small, comfortable home. Nothing grand, just a place that doesn't leak when it rains. The golden fish blinked slowly, and for a moment, the sea seemed to sigh. Your wish is granted, it said simply. Go home. Before Eldrick could reply, the fish dove beneath the waves, leaving behind a flash of gold that faded like a sunset on water. He rowed back quickly, unsure of what to expect. As his boat scraped against the sand, he looked up and stopped in astonishment. Where once their crooked little hut had stood, there now rose a neat, cozy cottage. Its walls were smooth white stone, the roof made of red tiles that glowed warmly in the morning light. Flowers bloomed in a small garden by the door, and smoke curled gently from a chimney. Mara stood at the doorway, her eyes wide with wonder. Eldrick, look, the fish, it truly granted the wish. He smiled, though unease fluttered in his chest. It seems the sea keeps its promises, he murmured. That night, as they sat by the fire in their new home, Mara laughed like a girl again. The warmth of the cottage, the comfort of clean clothes, it was all she had ever wanted. But Eldrick, gazing into the flames, couldn't shake the feeling that the sea was watching. He remembered the fish's eyes, bright, knowing, and perhaps a little sad. And though the cottage walls kept out the wind, Eldrick could still hear the faint whisper of the ocean, as if warning him that wishes, like tides, always come back.